As a Surge member, you'll unlock access to resources that build confidence, motivation, and mental well-being to empower girls to stay in the game today and pave the way for their future success. Up your game with free professional development and curriculum resources for coaches and athletes. Foster community and connection with VIP access to girls' sporting events, coaching forums, giveaways, and workshops hosted by industry-leading partners. Make waves with exclusive Surge branding packages, designs, and apparel. Recognize and celebrate with special awards like Team of the Season and Athlete of the Season to uplift and honor your female athletes. Unlock exclusive offers, including new product sneak peeks, promos, and member-only Surge stores. Fresh content designed to empower female athletes will be added to the platform every month. So, together, we can help power girls forward.
Awesome. Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar. This webinar is hosted in partnership with WeCOACH, and we're also joined by co-founder of Advanced NIL, Courtney Altemus. First off, I want to thank you all for being here today. We know as coaches, parents, educators, and athletes, you're all extremely busy. Therefore, we really appreciate your time today. Today's content is titled Her Name, Her Game, Her Brand, a guide to NIL for female athletes and coaches. In this webinar, you will learn how to navigate NIL and how to get the most out of it. With that being said, I'll go ahead and pass things off to Lizzie at WeCOACH.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lizzie Restano. I am the Associate Director of Member Outreach and Engagement here at WeCOACH. Wanted to give you a little background on WeCOACH. We are a nonprofit dedicated to the mission of recruiting, advancing, and retaining women in coaching of all sports at all levels. Our membership is about 20,000 coaches strong, and we have coaches who lead at the youngest levels at the youth sport, all the way up to high-level college athletics and professional sport. And what we do is we provide leadership development and professional growth activity opportunities for women coaches, both virtually and in person, for topics that have nothing to do with the X's and O's of sport, but everything to do with the outside forces that coaches deal with every day. And so today we are very excited for a very important conversation around name, image, and likeness, and what it means not just for coaches, but for our athletes as well. And joining us is someone who has been leading the way in the NIL space for a very long time, and in my opinion is the gold standard of an NIL expert and someone you want to lean on. And that's Courtney Altemus. She's a great friend of us at WeCOACH. She comes from a background in both collegiate athletics and financial services, which just makes her knowledgeable in so many ways. And she brings a practical understanding and approach that cuts through all the nonsense and gets to what really matters. We truly value our relationship with Courtney, and we're so excited to share her with everyone in the BSN Sports Surge community as well. So please join me in welcoming Courtney Altemus for this great conversation on name, image, and likeness.
Thank you so much, Lizzie Saxton. I am so excited to be here. I knew a little bit about Surge prior to planning this, but the more I've learned, the more I just love the mission, and obviously have loved the WeCOACH mission since I got involved with WeCOACH probably 7-ish years ago. One of the things that NIL brought, and it may not seem like this in the moment, but I'll talk about some statistics later to sort of talk about the gender breakdown in NIL deals. But one thing it brought at the same time was the exact same opportunity to all college student athletes on July 1 of 2021, and now obviously in 40+ states for high school athletes. And that was a significant moment. And ahead of that, I was really trying to get to anybody in any athletic department that would listen to me to tell them, you have no idea where the deals are coming. It could be, your household name quarterback of your football team, and it could be the captain of your field hockey team or your volleyball team. And no matter how big the deals are, everybody needs the same education. So I'm really thrilled that so many of you are joining and are interested. I have a deck that I'm going to share, and it's really geared towards some general education, and like I said, some gender breakdowns. You could sort of understand the dynamic of what's going on in NIL today and where the opportunities are for women as coaches, how to best support them as they navigate this space. Also, I'm going to touch on personal branding. And even if you're not an athlete and not looking to build out your personal brand, I think it's good to understand how we talk about brands and in the way of urging them to get to know themselves. I used to joke that when I worked with purely just pro athletes, I was going to save the world one pro athlete at a time. And now my new global mission is to help this next generation focus inward to ask them what they want versus looking at social media to find out what they should be wanting. So that's sort of the basis of our education. Looks like mostly coaches here today, a couple ADs, parents, maybe some athletes. So I appreciate everybody answering that question because it will help me in my comments. I will not be able to read the chat so much, but maybe if Lizzie and Saxon and Nicolette can kind of help me with that. I'm happy to take some questions throughout at the end. If in fact you find that I'm not touching on a subject you want to talk about, please do jump in. I'm not getting a lot into the weeds today about roster limits and revenue share, but I'm happy to talk about some of that stuff. We obviously won't know until next week exactly what's going to happen with House. But even outside of the House case, I think there's 23 active lawsuits in the NIL space currently, and we'll see more. So it's going to be a space that continues to change. We at Advance are going to continue to push for all equal resources across all athletics. And we will continue to be immersed, whether it be on a high school campus, college campus, or next week I'll be at the Indianapolis Colts on Tuesday. So we see it all. We see it at every level. And it's fascinating. It's an incredible opportunity. And it's also somewhat terrifying when you think about the potential. It's great opportunity, but also potential risk. So with that, I'm going to pull up this deck. And again, it's more just to sort of organize thoughts around this. Anybody who wants to jump in or ask questions, please do. I'll take it down from time to time or ask you guys to put some things in the chat when I ask questions. So we are going to define name, image, and likeness. And for any of you who have been with Advance before, you know that this is always where we start, because we found 9 months into working with collegiate athletes that 99% of them didn't understand what it meant. So we'll get to that. If you've been with me before, bear with me through that. Then I'm going to get into some statistics, and the significance of the statistics are really to show where there's growth opportunity for female athletes, what the breakdown is between male and female, and the difference of the types of deals. A lot of the male deals are driven by collectives. We're going to see that shift again once revenue share starts, if it starts. And so it's really good to be aware of where everything's coming from. So as your female athletes ask you questions or need help navigating, you can help them. Talk about that personal brand piece, like I talked about. And then just I'll recap at the end to remind everybody that NIL is a great way to teach life skills. Every time we are on campus or in a webinar, we always tell everybody that, you know, we're here because of NIL, but everything we teach is what we have taught since the beginning, and it's important for life, no matter whether you engage in NIL or not. So, Courtney Altemus, I live in Philly. As Lizzie said, former Wall Street exec, unbiased athlete educator. That comes from my realization when I was on the street that athletes need better education. And as long as I was managing their money and investing dollars, I, by definition, was biased. So I wanted to release those securities licenses, bring my expertise in education to athletes, but in a way that was completely unbiased. I don't care whether they participate in name, image, and likeness. I don't care what they do with their money. I care that they're making the right decisions for themselves. So everything we teach is based around that. Master's, got my MBA in finance. One of my business partners is a non-agent sports attorney. So he also is unbiased from the standpoint that he's not advising athletes on deals and then getting paid on those deals. His advisory role for athletes is to protect them in their contracts. So again, no ulterior motive to direct the athletes anywhere except for where they want to go, the opportunities they want to take, and also how to protect themselves from harm. I have 4 kids, they're all out of college. 3 were college athletes. One is an actor. He's adorable, but sometimes doesn't make great decisions. And so I've lived all of this from both a professional standpoint and parental. So again, we're unbiased. We're in about 40 different college athletic departments, 20 professional sports teams, 1 female professional sports team. We've been to Angel City. We're trying to increase that number. And then high school and youth, some individuals, some travel teams and programs, some of the elite programs. We are partnered with the IMG Academy. We get there about 5 times a year. We are providing some webinar and some individual coaching services through their NCSA arm, partnered with some state high school athletic associations, again, for the purpose of unbiased guidance and education. So, defining name, image, and likeness. When we talk about name, when we're on campus, we always ask student athletes to answer the question before we give them the answer. And they look at us like they're trying to figure out if we're asking a trick question, but it's not. Your name is your name. And we'll use Simone Biles in this example. Sometimes we'll use Michael Jordan because everybody knows him, but want to drive home the point of the actual definition. When we ask student athletes what image is, 99% of them will say it's your reputation, it's how you're viewed in the community. When in fact, it is a photo or a video of yourself. So any of those little GIFs or GIFs, however everybody says it, any video clip from competition, any photo or video of you is your image in name, image, and likeness. And then when we ask what likeness is, 99% of the student athletes will respond that it's likability and engagement on social media. And it's in fact just a graphic representation of yourself. So why is that important? When we talk about the definition of it, if you think about somebody thinking their image is their reputation and their likeness is likability and engagement, they don't know what they're selling, they don't know what they're protecting, and they automatically default to NIL as social media, and it's not just social media. So we've been trying to get everybody to understand this, in fact, is NIL is your rights to your name, image, and likeness. And the reason it's such a big deal, because athletes could not access those rights, be compensated, and maintain eligibility prior to July 1 of 2021. So we really want to make sure that we are driving home with student athletes, your name, your image, your likeness. Incredible opportunities. And if you decide to build a brand and take advantage of some of those opportunities and it's successful, fantastic. If God forbid something goes wrong, it's still your name, your image, your likeness. It's not something that a school or a travel team can step in and help you with. So really critical to understand opportunities and potential risks and make sure they protect themselves. So we also always ask them to brainstorm about some other ways to engage in NIL, which I would love if some of you want to put in the chat. Think about some ways outside of social media, all the deals that we see that are talked about. We see Livy Dunn has gotten so much recognition because of her social media presence, but there are other ways to engage. Would love it if anybody, even just take yourself off mute or put it in the chat. It's not a trick question. Okay. Yes, community involvement, charities, personal appearances, speaking engagements, deals with local businesses, all of those. Those are great examples. TV, yes. So we want to think about that definition and getting away from the whole idea of just social media. So some of these in the marketing category you mentioned, and I want to highlight the nonprofit because we talk to a lot of athletes about when they're building their personal brand, what are their interests, hobbies, groups that they like to support outside of their time in the classroom and in their sport. And so many of them care about underserved populations or people or places that need help. And we talk to them about how building their personal brand is about people experiencing them for their authentic self. And so it's not always all about money. They can actually help build their brand with who they are by helping community. Entrepreneurship. We talk to athletes as they build NIL about being the athlete CEO. They act as independent contractors in NIL, and we want them to really think about that and all the elements that go along with it. And then this really is, camps and clinics we like to talk about, training sessions, because it's low-hanging fruit if they want to engage in NIL, whether it's high school or college. They can set up a camp clinic in their hometown, and parents will pay for their younger athletes to learn the sport from the more experienced elite athletes. And that is a form of name, image, and likeness. So again, the definition is important to understand that it is in fact your persona rights. It's not all about social media, and it's really important to understand how to protect yourself. And with that said, I always encourage everybody to just double check the policy. As we know, there is not a uniform rules system about NIL, both in college and in high school. And even if the House settlement gets approved, depending on if a school is an opt-in or an opt-out, and also depending on the state, there's still going to be some differences. So always, always, always really important to understand state level, school level, any other governing body to make sure that athletes stay eligible if they want to participate in name, image, and likeness. Before I jump into current stats, does anybody have any questions about any of that or any feedback? Okay. So this is, when I say current, it's as of last school year. So this would be 23-24. And these numbers come from Sponsor United. So when you look at the statistics, 65% of all NIL deals are secured by men, but women average a higher number of brand deals. And individually, they average a higher number of deals than individual men. Couple of things. Obviously, football skews this just because of the sheer numbers. Also, collectives in their, ripe old age history of 3.5 years, more of them more dollars have gone to men than women. We have started to see some collectives that have raised money specifically for women's sports, but it still is a much higher rate that collectives support men's sports. So if you think about that, it would make sense that women have an average higher number of brand deals. Because when we think about NIL, I always think of the brand deals, of the engagement that we've talked about, as pure NIL, your name, your image, your likeness. And then collectives are more synthetic NIL. It's still an NIL deal, but the athlete isn't necessarily reaching out to a specific brand, There's a pool of money that's going to support them, and they'll sign a contract to do whatever they need to do to actually earn that money. Could be appearances, could be autographs, any number of things. But it's not a pure brand deal like Livy done with Viore, where she has curated her brand and her image and both reached out to in the beginning and now gets inbound calls from brands. And then because of those pure versus synthetic, there are more women with pure deals. So it makes sense that they have multiple deals. If you're an athlete and you get a nice chunk of change from a collective, that may be all you need. And you may decide that you really don't want to put the time and effort into seeking out other deals. This is, even though it was in the 23 to 24 report, this is the school year 22 to 23, but obviously significant. We saw huge growth in women's volleyball, track and field, more women than men in track and field, softball. So we saw the women's average come up significantly more than the men's average. And I think part of that also is those initial deals, those collective deals going to the football programs that just by sheer numbers have more athletes. At the Power 4 level, they get more exposure on TV. And so it was just logical that they were going to grow the fastest in the beginning. But women have really stepped up their efforts and have really, taken advantage of being an athlete and leveraging that to build the personal brand and get some deals. And so in 2022, we saw a smaller percentage of women who were engaged, 23, a much larger percentage. So again, the point I want to make about these statistics is we see women with more pure NIL deals. And it really is because women statistically have been more engaging than men. So the engagement rate, these are all social media statistics, but it could apply to appearances or commercials or engagement in community. They're almost 8 times, their engagement rate is almost 8 times that of men. And then their percentage of engaged followers, so this is specifically for social media, is higher. So that means the brands are going to want the women to advertise for them, because it's not just about the followers, it's about those followers or that audience spending time thinking about that athlete and that brand. So it's significant in terms of if you are helping somebody navigate NIL, thinking about what is naturally going to be a potential opportunity. And again, this just shows more of the same, that the engagement rate is much higher. And advertisers, brands, local businesses, they're all paying attention to this. So before I get into personal brands, I just want to talk a little bit. I just mentioned local businesses, and I do want to talk a little bit about that, because what we're seeing in high school is athletes who are saying, I really love getting my smoothies from this place, my pizza from this place, my burgers, my salads. And maybe they go there after practice, after games and matches, competitions. And they're starting to start to develop those skills of connecting with companies that could pay them, having those conversations, talking about deals. Locally, if they really like a certain restaurant or local business, they can reach out to that business and say, I come here all the time. I love it. This is why I love it. Oh, by the way, I'm actually an athlete, high school or college team, sport. And now that I can be compensated for name, image, and likeness, I was thinking maybe I could help partner with you and drive your revenues. And maybe that's not even in exchange for cash. Maybe that's in exchange for food, product, clothing, whatever it is that they enjoy, it's a good place to start. And we're seeing more and more, like I said, a lot of high school, but also a lot of college student athletes engaging in those potential deals. So if anybody, I'm going to stop share for a second and just ask, before I move forward, now that I've sort of talked about all of that, what is the first word that comes to your mind when you hear NIL? Kids do love merch. I know soccer's getting there. It is growing. I can tell you from the merch and food. Yep.
If I could just interject, I would literally just say money. I think that's what a lot of the athletes think when they hear NIL as well. It's just
Yep.
they want money.
Absolutely. And I have to tell you, when we're on campus, we get the athletes to hit a QR code and we have them answer that question on their phones and it pops up on the screen. Money is always the number one. Absolutely. Social media influence ruins varsity, interscholastics. It's people say the wild, wild west. It's ruining sports. The change has been so radical, so fast, and so hard to keep up with that there is a lot of pushback and negativity that's out there for good reason. And I think a lot of people are trying to help make sure that we have some sort of uniform regulations in place, because right now it's like the epitome of free markets without protection for the athlete. So I'm hoping that we'll see some improvement there. Should be at the high school level. You know, it doesn't, whether I think it should be or not is really irrelevant. And if you think back to like the definition of name, image, and likeness, everybody in the United States has the right to use their name, image, and likeness for compensation. Athletes at the high school and college level didn't have that right if they wanted to stay eligible for their sport. So once people started realizing that the numbers at the college level were in the multiple billions of dollars for the TV contracts, the question about antitrust, whether or not schools were preventing athletes from access to their name, their image, their likeness, compensation commensurate for the value they're bringing into the school, that's what really drove this change. And the governing bodies were in a position where they were facing, and that's what the House case is all about, antitrust. And if the House settlement is approved, it will be the largest antitrust case in United States history. So the issue is, once the antitrust issues rose and judges, including the Supreme Court, started issuing opinions saying these athletes are not being compensated commensurate with the value they're bringing in, and that's constitutionally incorrect in the United States, then the conversation became about individual rights. And so I think in a perfect world, we would have seen slow changes over time once all of those TV contracts got so large. But we didn't. We saw amateurism being the name of all this, of what people, governing bodies, wanted to put forth, and that was great for the athlete on one hand. However, there's been all these unintended changes and consequences. And even with this money, I mean, I see it every day because I'm on campus. They don't have protections, and the collectives are raising money. They're associated with the school, but they're not part of the school, so they can pay whoever they want. So it's frustrating for a lot of the Olympic sports, a lot of the women's sports, because the collectives aren't raising as much money as football raises or men's basketball. Women's basketball luckily has raised a fair amount of money. So anyway, there is, as much as it was the same opportunity given to everybody at the same time, there's a lot of inequity and there's no regulations around it. So I think a lot of unintended consequences have happened. I've also seen a lot of really happy stories. Women, people in Olympic sports who have hobbies outside of their sport. I worked with a gymnast from University of Florida. She obviously was a phenomenal gymnast because she's on the University of Florida team. She knew she wasn't going to be an Olympic gymnast, and she happened to love to cook. And she started some do-it-yourself cooking videos on TikTok. And fast forward about 6 months, she's on Florida gymnastics. She's known for her gymnastics, but then everybody loved this story that she loves cooking. So all of a sudden she has 2 million followers on TikTok, and brands start reaching out because not just the cooking or the gymnastics, but it's a story. And that's what brands love. They love the authenticity. She then leveraged that to do what she wanted to in the beginning and create a gymnastics board game to sell to kids. So for everything bad in the media, there are some individual stories that are really good. All the schools we work with actually really are trying, student athlete development, are really trying to educate to use this NIL as a place to bring more life skills, because it's real now, it's real time. So yes, the authenticity is key. One of my other favorite stories is a linebacker at SMU. His senior season was the first season of NIL. And obviously he always wanted to go to the NFL. It was clear that he wasn't, to him, by his senior year, was going to make it. But he was somebody who was always interested in doodling and drawing. And so he started painting and selling the paintings during that final season for $50, $100. And then he became a story. You know, this big deal linebacker, his dad played in the NFL, who's an artist. And he's now selling his art. Fast forward to now, he has a tremendous business. He's being commissioned from places all over the world to paint. And he never really got to even exercise that muscle until he was 21 or 22 years old. So I digress, but I wanted to make sure that we're talking about everything that y'all want to talk about. And also, if there are questions about house or how that's going to impact, I'm definitely happy to take those at the end. But I do want to get into personal brand a bit. And again, for coaches, athletic directors, adults on this webinar, I'm going to talk about this in the way that we talk to the athletes, because I want you to understand what we're saying to them and what we're asking them to think about, how much introspection we're asking them to do. And we're really trying to make it something that comes from the inside out, so that they're not immediately going to social media to see what they should buy or what they should post or how they should look. So we talked to them about how a personal brand is simply a person's perception of another person, product, service, experience, organization, etc. So again, just like the NIL definition, a lot of times they will go immediately to brand equals social media influencing. And you may use social media as a way to highlight your brand, but social media isn't your brand. So that's what we really try to focus on, them getting to know themselves. And so we will ask them when we're with them to just say the first word that comes to mind when they see these logos. And, you know, we'll get on campuses where Gatorade is a sponsor, we'll get some people to yell out sponsor, electrolytes, drink, too much sugar, gross, Apple, computer, Steve Jobs, Starbucks, you know, they usually say their favorite drink. Amazon, they'll say fast, less expensive. My deliveries got stolen. They were ruined when they got there. They just tell us their experience with these logos, and they immediately know what the companies are. So we want to convey to them that it's really important as you are building your brand to understand how other people are experiencing you, because it's that quick that they make associations. And a personal brand for high school athletes, for college athletes, it's not just about NIL. It's a great exercise to go through, because throughout life, you're going to have to differentiate yourself from your peers. If you're high school, trying to get to college, knowing yourself and being able to talk about yourself confidently in a concise way to recruiters, to coaches, to admissions folks, it's a really important life skill. And then college, obviously going on to whether it's that grad school interview or that job interview, whether that's in professional sports or some other profession. So again, we come back to that focus on life skills and self. It's your name, it's your image, it's your likeness, it's your brand. Your brand is important no matter whether you engage in NIL or not. So when we get them thinking about those associations, just break it down to positive and negative. And so we'll talk to them about some of those associations that came to their mind when they saw those logos. And in the case of Amazon, when some of them say, you know, didn't get delivered on time or got stolen or was broken when it got there, we talk about once you've had a negative association with a brand, what your likelihood is to use that brand again. Case of Amazon, most of them are going to use Amazon again. It's just too convenient. But in the case of Gatorade, maybe they switch to Powerade. There's so many different drink options. Lots of coffee shops popping up, especially local ones. So getting them to think about, like, what am I putting out there? How are people experiencing me? And are they experiencing something positive or negative? At the same time, we're reminding them, be authentic. It's exhausting to try to carry on a brand that is not you. And I'm still, after all these years, trying to get to know myself. So we know, and you all know from working with them, high school, college, they don't know who they are, and they're trying to figure it out. So we try to break it down, get them started on what we call a primer. It's a workbook, but starting to think about interests and hobbies outside your sport. I was on a high school campus recently, and a young woman on the basketball team said, what if I can't think of anything outside basketball? And I said, well, you know, think about, like, what are you doing if you're not in the classroom or on the court or in the weight room? Basketball. So I said, okay, that's your brand. You are a basketball player. And right now, that's what you focus on. But others will talk about, like some of the stories I mentioned, the gymnast who likes to cook, football player who loves to paint. We've had musicians, we've had people who talk about their hobbies as these organizations that they want to support, the volunteering they do. And so they're getting to know themselves, and they're getting to think about other areas that they might want to engage in NIL. That's not just, I'm a basketball player, or I'm a gymnast, or I'm a field hockey player, so my value equals X. They're trying to get them away from thinking that way. And then think about the brands and products or services they like. We were working with the Ohio State soccer team a couple seasons ago. We broke them up into groups. We had them brainstorming about potential ways they might engage in name, image, and likeness. And I walked over, and we had them working on these big Post-its, and the handwriting of this young woman was unbelievable. And I had to stop and say something about her handwriting. And she said, oh, you gave me a big pen, and I just love this. And so we got into this whole idea of reaching out to Bic. She loves to write. She's artistic. She's a D1 soccer player, but her story is writing and creatively expressing herself. words that describe you. We try to get them to think of words that are descriptors outside of athletics. So a lot of them will say hardworking, driven, competitive. And we make the point that, yeah, those are probably words that could describe everybody in this room. But what is it that makes you different? And we get them talking a lot about that. And we get descriptions like funny, kind, likes to paint, likes music. And then really thinking again about how to differentiate. So this is how we get them started on thinking about their brand. And as you can see, it's a very methodical process. And we get pretty deep in these first steps because we want them to keep going back to this process of who am I? What do I care about? What do I want to engage in? Do I even want to engage in name, image, and likeness? It looked like a great opportunity. I wanted to make a lot of money, but this is a lot of work. Or is my goal just to develop my brand so that I'm ready when it's time to do those interviews for college or for that job after college? And I'm going to wrap with this and leave some time for questions and answers. But I keep talking about how NIL is all life skills. And I, have worked with pro athletes for almost 30 years. My two partners have worked with pro athletes for a couple decades. My one partner's younger brother played in the NFL for 7 seasons. We have been advising athletes before NIL, those rookies coming from the time of not being able to be paid in their sport to being able to be paid. So knowing what the challenges are, just making that transition from unpaid to paid, and then ongoing, what comes up for them. And we sort of boiled all of the things that we recognize into 4 major themes: and decision-making, due diligence, money, and contracts. And we put them in puzzle pieces because we want them visualizing outside of your sport. Everything impacts the other areas of your life. And so it's really important to learn as much as you can and slow down. Decision-making, you can't use that muscle memory, those thousandths of a second decision that you use in your sport, and apply them to your life decisions, because it could impact you for the rest of your life. Due diligence, making sure they understand that there is a risk assessment process that has to go into everything, even reaching out to the local pizza shop. Okay, we might know the owners because we've been there, but does it have a good reputation? Do I want to align myself with that? People coming in, agents coming in and saying, hey, I can get you deals. Who is this person who says they want to work with me? They call themselves an agent, but are they really even an agent? Because there's no regulations around high school agents or college agents in every state right now. So money is obvious. We talked about how it's the most, the first thing that most of them think about. But we also realize that it's not everything we think about with money. We talk about, how to save, of course, but we still have 30% of our rookies that we work with in football and in the NBA who haven't paid taxes for NIL. And they're smart kids. We think, oh, we can just say, this is how you pay your taxes. But they're not really understanding how it connects with them. For example, if I ask a room of student athletes what a tax return is, most of them will tell me that it's when their parents get money back from overpayment to the IRS. So they think taxes are good. They don't associate paying with taxes. When we ask them what filing taxes means, they have no idea. So we realize as we work with them more, just the importance of really helping them understand the basics. And then when it comes to decisions around money, instead of saying, here are the numbers, here's how you do the math, this is what you should and shouldn't do. Again, just like with the branding, we get them to think inside out. What are my needs? What are my wants? How do those translate into fixed and variable costs, and obviously age appropriate at each level. Not a lot of high school student athletes are going to be paying for a lot of their expenses in the moment, but getting them to think about that, thinking about a process that they can apply to money for the rest of their life. And then in contracts, we have seen so many bad contracts out there. And I can't emphasize enough that when student athletes are engaging in NIL, and that actually includes when they're signing these revenue share agreements with schools, it's basically an NIL deal with the school. No contract is the same. And language is, because it's different and in different parts of the contract, it can mean different things at different schools. There are collective contracts that, in as much as they're associated with schools, there are a lot of them who don't really have the athlete's best interests in the front of their mind. Contracts at the high school level, even just agreeing with that local pizza place, I'm going to show up after a weekly game with my teammates. We're going to take pictures and post. You're going to give us free pizza. It'll be great. Are you going to post 1 time a week, or are you going to post 4 times a week? Are you allowed to post in your school uniform, or do you have to have a different uniform on? And those are agreements. And one thing that athletes don't realize, and we tell them all the time, you can create a contract in your direct messages and social media. If you're going back and forth and you say, that sounds great, thanks for reaching out. Yeah, I would love $50,000 for posting in your gear. Well, if you don't know how many times you have to post, you don't know if that $50,000 is going to be all $50,000 worth of gear or cash. If you've agreed to that, even in DMs, that's a contract. So that really speaks to the risks that I keep talking about, the underlying risks. And we want to make sure these are all processes they learn for the rest of their lives so they can protect themselves. So they are all life skills. And so I think, zooming out on name, image, and likeness, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of lawsuits, there's so much being discussed. But at the end of the day, working with athletes, it's about helping navigate opportunities, risks. And when we talk to the athletes, we ask them to talk to us about what their risk reward association is when they're playing a sport. If it's basketball, low percentage shot, high percentage shot. Am I going to take the high percentage shot? If I have 3 defenders on me, probably not. I'm going to fire it out. It's no different in life, but you have to slow it down and you have to think that way. So I have talked a lot. We have about 10 minutes left. So anybody have any questions, comments, want me to talk about anything else I didn't cover?
Hi, I have a question.
Sure.
I'm just going to try to jump in real quick. So my name is Brianna Sumter. I am the head women's flag football coach at LaGrange College. As everyone knows, flag football is one of those quickly emerging sports. It's blowing up all over the collegiate level in high schools, and so it has made, believe it or not, little splashes in the NIL world. I was actually speaking with another coach, and one of the things that we see happening in our sport, especially with these young ladies, is they're actually signing NIL deals to I don't want to say faulty brands or unknown
Yeah.
brands, but they're signing these deals with um, not even any brand anyone can really identify. And so, how do we help them, I guess, kind of navigate the hype? Because I think they're getting excited with it being a new space and new opportunity for women in sports. So how do we help them navigate the hype and slow them down as far as, you really should think about this, think about what they're offering you. What are the questions you have? What, what are you really trying to get out of in the end of this deal? And my second question would be, what are kind of your thoughts about um, those more collective NIL deals for entire teams, such as selling the shirt with the brand and the names on the back. Um, just I know that's a little bit newer, but what are your thoughts about those kinds of opportunities as well?
So two fantastic questions. And I'm so glad you mentioned this whole notion of signing deals with brands that may or may not be aligned with their values at a minimum. And so that speaks to that due diligence piece. I think that number one, I would share this recording with them so they can see at least some of what I went over with the brand piece, talking about due diligence. We do have some online courses. We do webinars where we can go through that due diligence process, getting them to slow it down. We use the acronym SIFT, sort, inquire, filter, try. And the T for try means, okay, if you've made a decision to work with a brand or work with an agent or an advisor, just because they're right for today doesn't mean they are going to be right for you forever. So you need to keep monitoring that. And so I think specific for your question, the more you can encourage them to think about themselves and that brand, and just pause. That hype that you talk about, they know they need to pause. But when it comes in and somebody's saying, hey, loved your play, loved your post, whatever, I love flag football, I think this is amazing. I want to highlight female flag football players, which is a whole other potentially scary story too, depending on who the brand is. Gotta pause. Have to go through a process of asking yourself, who is this? What are their values? Do they align with mine? We also have developed a due diligence platform, which I will make sure everybody gets follow-ups for this in the email. It's free for athletes. It's new. What we're trying to get athletes to do is ask these people and brands that come to them and say, we want to do business with you. Are you certified? And most of these third parties aren't going to know what that means because it's a brand new platform. But it's a platform that aggregates multiple quantitative checks. So hits a criminal background check, countries of doing business, sex offender registry, which you think about, you all had to go through screens to be able to be in a position to work with athletes. How many people are coming at them now who have never had to go through screens? We do social media scrub, negative news check. And then once they're in the system, we're monitoring them ongoing. They're responsible for paying for it, the third parties, the businesses, the advisors, et cetera. And we just want to keep building that database. So if the athlete's asking, are you certified? And that person says no, and the athlete says, go to this website, and the person goes and sees that they're going to have all these checks run on them and then continue to be monitored and come back to them and say, yeah, I'm not going to do that. That's information. So we're trying to give them processes, resources that are realistic, because we know they're going to get excited and they're not going to pause. So we could say due diligence all day long, but we want to give them specific tools. And then, in terms of, first of all, did I answer the first question? It's hard. I have still much more to say about it, and I could talk about it forever. But again, I'll make sure you get links to our courses, my information, the certification. I can, if somebody, maybe Saxon or Nicolette, maybe if you could go to ansbc.com and put that link in, ansbc.com.
Can you say it again, Courtney? I can drop it in.
Sure.
Okay,
ANSBC, Athlete National Sports Business Clearinghouse. It's a mouthful.
thank you.
And there is a database already, so you can search for people that are in there. but highly recommend that you tell your student athletes, ask if they're certified. And even if they don't go any further than that, at least if they start getting used to asking. And then to your second question about the some of the collective deals. So the jerseys, there's a number of groups that are working with schools. I'm not sure if they're working with your school or not, but where they, like, one of the companies is Brandar, Athlete Inc., where they produce these jerseys and the athletes have an opportunity to opt in, and they can opt in and the jerseys get sold. And if their jersey gets sold, they get paid. If not, they don't. And they're, as long as the school has vetted them, they're good companies. It's an easy thing to do. I had one athlete he's a track and field athlete. And he said, nobody pays attention to track and field, but my family does. He said, so I bought 20 jerseys to give out as Christmas presents, and then I got paid on those. So it was basically a discount and I got my name out there. So just sort of talking practically about those opportunities and, being creative, but being careful.
Thank you.
Sure, of course. What other questions?
I have a question for you.
Sure.
So earlier you mentioned this is low priority, but you mentioned the low hanging fruit. But then that you mentioned that women tend to be the more higher percentage of recipients of NIL deals. Given that this webinar is more based towards the female athlete, can you speak to the potential negatives and exploitation of female athletes, as well as, I guess, to wrap it all up, at the high school level? I mean, we all have a booster club or some private nonprofit organization that kind of serves this purpose quasi, and just how all of that plays into it.
For sure. Great question. To speak to the exploitation piece, everybody has to be extremely aware that we know, I mean, you can do a Google search and see the debates about this issue of, is a female athlete leveraging their athleticism or their sexuality? And by that, I mean, are companies coming in and saying, hey, you're a gymnast. You basically wear a second skin as a uniform or a bathing suit or volleyball shorts. There are so many companies, they might even be reputable, but they know what sells. And so it's really important to have open dialogue with your female student athletes. Again, it goes back to the brand. Who am I? So if you hear Livy Dunn talk, she'll say, I'm just being myself. And you might hear a Stanford basketball player, Haley, I can't think of her last name right now. She was completely against any of those types of deals. Everything she did was in her sweats, in her loose fitting basketball clothes. She wanted to be pure athlete. So we can't ignore this pressure that females are under all the time. And it's a tough thing to talk about. You have to be careful, but it comes back to, who am I? What's my brand? What are my values? Who is this brand who wants to do business with me? And what are their values? And what's the definition of this deal? They may say, we want to celebrate your athleticism, and then come out and do a photo shoot and make you look more like a Sports Illustrated swimsuit model than a basketball player or a field hockey player. So it's safest to come back to that definition of brand, protect yourself. And at the high school level, parents, guardians, first line of defense. As much as you can involve them in learning more, the better. And they really have to be engaged, obviously, by definition, if they're signing any contracts, because they have minor children most of the time. And then on the booster and collectives, or booster nonprofit side, those groups in most states are not allowed to act as a collective does in college. Like, they're not allowed to sign deals directly with the athletes. That's changing, but that's where it really comes back to checking with your state high school athletic association or your school or the state to see if they in fact can raise money to do deals. There's a lot they can do to help the student athlete build brands, you know, getting into the community, doing some volunteer work, etc. But it's just really important to make sure that whatever they want to engage in, they meaning the athletes, that you're really checking the rules. You want to make sure they all still stay eligible to play. So I think we are at time, and I want to respect everybody's time, but I will make sure that we get resources, links sent out to everybody, links to the courses. You see the ANSBC website there. Remember, the message there is tell your athletes and their parents, ask if somebody's certified, show this video, and focus on, remember, my goal is to make sure this generation starts making decisions from the inside out versus taking in information from everybody else and deciding what they need from there. So hopefully it's been helpful. I can work with Nicolette and Saxton and Lizzie and make sure, you know, I have some availability to follow up questions or whatever everybody needs, but I really appreciate everybody's time.